Okay, today is a little different because I filmed this episode over an hour of commentary, and of course my old microphone was not working. That microphone, it's a nice microphone. I've used it maybe 40 to 50 times and just it is failing me in the last month or two, and I'm done with it. It's irritated me too much. I'm tired of refilming stuff. So I'm using my $30 mini mic that I got from the States, and we're going to see how it does. And if it's terrible, I'm so sorry. But if the audio works, no matter how bad it might be, if you can hear my voice, I am not refilming this. So you're just going to have to deal with it. And sometimes I might have to set down the mic to flip through my Bible. And there's nothing I can do about that. So again, sincerely sorry. But the blue mic is just, terrible. So with that, today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 27, which is quite long. It's not the longest because obviously Matthew 26 was, but it's got quite a bit of substance. So with that being said, let's get into it. Also, if you hear any weird clacking noises, it's probably my neighbor's dog, which is chewing on a dog toy right now. But you might be able to see Bandit is sleeping right here, being so quiet and perfect and adorable. And I just love him. Obviously, I'm biased because he's my dog, but he is just absolutely perfect. Okay, let's get into it. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death, and they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate the governor. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money." So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, "And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price on him whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave him," oh my gosh, I'm struggling, "and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me." Now when Jesus said, oh my gosh, now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You have said so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave them no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, when he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." And then he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisted together a crown of thorns. They put it on his head and a reed in his right hand, and kneeling before him they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and they took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe, and put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross, and when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who had passed by derided him. I don't know if that's how you say that. Wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud saying, okay, this is Aramaic, so, don't think that I'm saying this well. "Eli, Eli, lema Bacthani, I don't know. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, "This man is calling Elijah." And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." And Jesus cried out with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs also were open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." There were also many women there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea, named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise.' Therefore order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away, and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. All right, back to verse 1. Sorry, I'm going to cover the mic so I can get my sniffle out of the way. I hope that saved you. It's only when I start filming these Bible videos that I all of a sudden have the sniffles out of nowhere. No cold, no other sickness, only when I'm trying to film this. Alright, so verse 1. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death, and they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate the governor. So, setting the scene. The chief priests had, well, Thursday night, the night before, was the Last Supper for Jesus and the disciples. Late Thursday night, early Friday morning is when he's arrested, taken by the chief priests, and they condemn him to death for blasphemy. Now, because they don't have jurisdiction over the death penalty, and I'll read something from the study Bible in a second. They are going to Pilate now Friday morning, a little later, at a more decent hour for visiting, to see if Pilate will give them permission to give the death penalty. Here's what my study Bible says about that. Give me a second. Dolly, what are you doing? No, don't come over here. Sorry, I shouldn't have said your name, but you're really loud. Go to your bed. Okay. The governor of Judea and Roman prefect under Emperor Tiberius, to maintain ultimate control, the Romans kept the death penalty under their own jurisdiction and reserved the right to intervene in any case. The Roman historian Tacitus records Christ's execution in the reign of Tiberius by sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilate. Okay. What you should know is that blasphemy, while it earned the death penalty under Israel, under their law, it did not earn the death penalty under Roman law. So when they appeal to Pilate, saying that Jesus deserves death, they're going to do it by saying that he's competing with Caesar. Okay, I'll elaborate on that when we get there. Verse 3. Then, when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. So, he changed his mind. However, it specifically says he changed his mind, which in Greek is, don't quote me on this, metamelomai. And not metanoia, which would have meant a change of heart. So he feels guilty and bad. And he says, because in verse 4, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. So he feels bad for betraying an innocent man, but he hasn't changed his heart and his belief that Christ is the Messiah. He's still wrong. And then verse 5, and throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. Now, if you listened to the last episode, then you got a little snippet, but I'm going to say it again because it is so important and so intricate. The prophecy that Judas is fulfilling right here. If we flip to Zechariah, oh my gosh, I wonder if you're going to hear the flipping like really well because the microphone is so much closer to it now. Oh my gosh, and I can't even get there. Okay, Zechariah. Okay. Going to the right of Jonah, Micah, Habakkuk. Okay. Chapter 11, Zechariah, verses 12 and 13. Okay? It says, Then I said to them, if it seems good to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them. And they weighed out as my wages 30 pieces of silver. Then the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the lordly price at which I was priced by them. So I took the pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord to the potter. This is important. So if you did not listen to the last episode, that's fine, although I highly recommend because I broke down this prophecy in Zechariah a lot more. But basically, Zechariah, when he gives this prophecy, he is the shepherd, and then he's dealing with the flock and other bad shepherds, poor leaders that are leading the flock astray. But it's being fulfilled now again, which happens with several prophecies in the Bible that's fulfilled multiple times. And so now we see that Jesus is the good shepherd. And when it says earlier in verse 8, but I became impatient with them and they also detested me. And he's talking about the flock. So the flock his sheep, the lost sheep of Israel that he came to protect and lead, detest him, which we see is obviously true because it's the Israelite priests that, are putting him to death. So now, then I said to him, if it seems good to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them. And they weighed out my wages as 30 pieces of silver. Obviously, this is the amount that Judas was paid for betraying Jesus. In, I think it's Deuteronomy, I want to say 23, but I might be wrong. Listen to the last episode, but that's the price for a slave. So it's severely insulting. So in the prophecy, the shepherd is like, oh, pay me what you think I'm worth. And they pay 30 silvers. It's like, okay, clearly you're not worth much. They did not respect his leadership and his protection. Now we see that same thing in that Judas, when he went seeking the chief priests and he asked, how much will you pay me to betray Jesus? They are assigning in that moment what they think is the worth of Jesus, which they did. They thought it was 30 silvers. Again, an insulting amount. But direct fulfillment of this prophecy. And then, well, hold on. Let's keep reading for a moment. And then, I just flipped. Sorry, I just realized I'm moving around this mic a lot. Okay, verse 6. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money. Now, I'm not going to read it, but in Deuteronomy 23, verse 18, it says that that the chief priests in the temple cannot accept money that was earned through prostitution. And so there is a standard to them for what money can be accepted. As it clearly said, it's blood money, so they know that they should not accept this into the temple. Even though it's the blood money that they paid, so, we already knew they were corrupt, but... Okay, verse 7. So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver and the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. Back in Zechariah 11, verse 13, then the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the lordly price at which I was priced by them. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord to the potter. Okay, Judas literally in verse 5 threw the money into the temple, and then the priest took that money and bought with it the potter's field. The money went to the potter, which is obviously no man could come up with like the fulfillment of in prophecy like that. That is something that to me proves that the word of God was truly inspired by God. God breathed, as I think Peter said. One thing I want to discuss is that in verse 9 it says, then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, blah, blah, blah. Now, there's two reasons that it could be saying Jeremiah. Maybe it's both reasons, but I believe in one reason more than the other. So, Jeremiah is, in chapter 19 of Jeremiah, it talks about, something related to the potter. And so, it's, according to my study Bible, it thinks that Jeremiah 19 verses 1 to 13 is something that is referenced in this prophecy about the potter's field. I did read it, however, to me it did not make, it says in verse 4 of that, and because they have filled this place with the blood of innocents, and as we just read, Jesus was innocent, so they spilled innocent blood. So, part of it does make sense as you're reading it. However, it didn't it didn't obviously jump out to me as what was being quoted like it did with Zechariah. Now, the other reason, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, that they could have Matthew could have said that was Jeremiah is because the scrolls, back in the day, the scrolls were divided and had, they didn't have every single prophet or Jewish writing on one scroll, right? Like, there's no way you could fit all that. And so they would have, like, the Torah all on one, and then, like, the prophets all on another. Well, from what I found, it said that the scroll that had all the prophets, the first one that was listed on it was Jeremiah. And so sometimes if they're referencing something that was on that same scroll, even if it wasn't written by Jeremiah, because it was on, that's the first of the stories on the scroll, they might just say, oh, it was said by Jeremiah, meaning it was said it's on that scroll. Does that make sense? And so that's what I think sounds more plausible, because this fits so well with Zechariah. Again, go read Jeremiah 19 verses 1 through 13 on your own. Come to your own decision. But I think Zechariah clearly fits this prophecy better. All right. Verse 11. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You have said so." So this is when the chief priests are petitioning to the Roman government that he is challenging Caesar's spot as king over the people, because that would be treason, and they could, give him the death penalty for that. Like I said, under Roman law, blasphemy does not earn the death penalty. So they need to appeal to Pilate in a different way. That's why they say that he calls himself the king of the Jews. Jesus answers, "You have said so." Just like in Matthew 26, "You have said so" puts the responsibility on the speaker. Basically, your words, not mine. And I mean, he is kind of agreeing, because it's true. He is king of the Jews. He's king of everything. Verse 12. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Sorry, I just lost my spot. Verse 13. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave them no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. This fulfills Isaiah 53. Oh, I flipped past it. Okay, Isaiah 53, verse 7, which says, "He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth." And so he is not refuting these charges. Okay. Verse 15. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. This was not, I'm not sure that was a widespread rule that every governor did. I think this was just something that Pilate decided to do to try and earn favor with the Jews, that he would release for them any one person they wanted. Verse 16. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had let me tell you about Barabbas before I move on. We know a few things about Barabbas based on the other Gospels. So first, in John, oh my gosh, John chapter 18, verse 40, it says, "They cried out again, not this man, but Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a robber. So clearly we know from that verse, Barabbas was a robber. Nothing crazy there. And then we're going to go to Luke 23. Okay, Luke 23, verses 18 to 19. I'm looking. Okay. "But they all cried out together, 'Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city, and for murder.'" And then Mark 15, verse 7, also just agrees with that he was arrested for murder and, public disturbance. So, Also, one thing I want to say, Barabbas is Bar just means son of, so that was probably his last name, Barabbas. I want to say, do your own research, but I want to say Barabbas' first name was actually Jesus as well. Again, look it up, but I think it was for some reason. I don't remember why, but do your own research. Okay, so back in Matthew 27, verse 17. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Who do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus who is called Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. So Pilate knows that the chief priests did not deliver him up because they think that he's challenging Rome. He knew that it was because of, obviously, their envious nature, and that they were jealous of Jesus's following, of his authority, his teaching, and that's why they put him up. So Pilate tries to subtly, save Jesus by being like, oh, well, you have Jesus who's clearly not a bad guy, so I'm going to give to them the worst prisoner I can think of to try and make them choose Jesus. Verse 19. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." This is actually kind of important because obviously this pushes Pilate to really stay uninvolved, but the Romans believed dreams were omens, and so they would have taken that very seriously. So whatever dream God revealed to Pilate's wife, she went out of her way to have a guard or someone send that message to him. Like, it had to be delivered to him as soon as possible. Okay, verse 20. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So Pilate, again, he clearly knows that Jesus is not in the wrong, has not committed a crime, and is an innocent man. And yet, knowing all that, Pilate is still a coward because he doesn't do anything. In verse 24, it says, "So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, 'I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves.'" So while he knows that it's wrong and he doesn't want any part of it, he lets them crucify him. He still gives them permission because, remember, the Romans had the authority to intervene and deny any death penalty they wanted to. He could have ended it right there, but he didn't want to riot because that would have made him look bad. And so he chose his little reputation over what he knew was right. So he is a coward. Pontius Pilate was the ultimate, well, not the ultimate, but an ultimate coward. Verse 25. And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." This is a really weird saying, but from my understanding, it's basically the people just taking responsibility for killing Jesus, saying, "His blood be on us." It's like them saying, it's our job to do it now, and we will do it. Verse 26, then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Okay, scourged. Roman flogging was horrifically cruel punishment. Those condemned to it were tied to a post and beaten with a leather whip that was interwoven with pieces of bone and metal, which tore through skin and tissue, often exposing bones and intestines. In many cases, the flogging itself was fatal. The Romans scourged Jesus nearly to death so that he would not remain alive on the cross after sundown. That is from my study Bible. Okay, so now Jesus has been scourged, he's been beaten and whipped, and now he is going to be mocked. Verse 27. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. Obviously, the governor's headquarters would be where Pontius Pilate does his work and whatnot. A battalion, according to my study Bible, it would have been 120 to 200 soldiers. Verse 28, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit on him, and they took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him out. They stripped him of the robe. Oh my gosh. And put his own clothes on him and led him away to be crucified. Which is, I mean, obviously they're mocking him. That is a fulfillment of Psalm 22, which I'll reference it later on, but we're going to keep on rolling. Okay. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. According to my study Bible, I highly recommend getting one, guys. It's obviously very useful because you see how much I use mine. Cyrene was a region in North Africa with a large Jewish population. Simon was likely a Jew who had traveled to Jerusalem for the Passover. Jesus was severely weakened from the scourging and loss of blood, and was therefore unable to carry his cross, which weighed 30 to 40 pounds. The skin and muscles of his back would have been severely lacerated, and he could have suffered severe injury to his internal organs. Okay, so that is why they're having this man carry it for him. Verse 33, and when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means a place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. Gall, according to my research, is a bitter herb and sometimes poisonous, so they gave it to him probably trying to help him out and die faster. Which, the way I just said that was like so abrupt. Sorry, Jesus. We are so sorry you died. But that probably is why they gave it to him. Okay, verse 35. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. This is a direct, explicit fulfillment of Psalm 22. Can you hear that little, that little page flip? I bet it's so prominent right now. Oh my gosh, I'm almost there. Okay. In Psalm 22, verse 16. For dogs encompass me, a company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So, obviously they're literally casting lots for his clothes. Also, fun fact, the word excruciating literally comes from people being crucified because the pain was that intense. Like the crux and excruciating, the crux, literally comes from the word for crucifixion. So, fun fact. Yeah, that's insane though. They came up with a word just for that because it was so painful. They didn't have a word that did it justice. Okay, moving on. 36. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there, and over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." So, what would happen to criminals that were crucified is that, first of all, this would take place in a very public area. I think Jesus's crucifixion took place like right outside the gates of Jerusalem, and they would put the charges above them, as they did in this case. They put, the king of the Jews, but for like the other two robbers, probably just said above them robbers. That way people would see the charge and it would deter them from doing the same behavior that earned that person death. Okay, verse 38. Then two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. This is a fulfillment of Isaiah 53. Hold on. Verse. I just lost my page. Okay. Isaiah. Hold on. I gotta set down this mic. And I flipped too far. Okay, Isaiah 53, verse 12. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the many, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul to death and was numbered with the transgressors. And so he was, treated like the sinners, like the robbers. Okay? All right, back to Matthew. Verse 39, and those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." So, in Psalm 22, verse 7 and 8, it says, "All who see me mock me." Okay, literally when we read the soldiers mocking him, there you go. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. We literally just read that they were wagging their heads at him. And this is in quotes saying what the mockers are telling Jesus. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. So they're mocking that him, saying, if God loves you, then God would save you. Okay, back to Matthew, verse 41. So also the chief priests and the scribes and the elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him. For he said, I am the Son of God." And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Verse 45. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. We see darkness. Obviously it's a motif used throughout the Bible describing evil. However, we do see darkness similar to this in Exodus chapter 10. And let me read that for you. Oh my gosh. Okay. Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 to 23. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was pitch darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days, but all the people of Israel had light where they lived. So, in this, the darkness was used by God to express his displeasure with Pharaoh and Egypt. Now it's being used again as God expresses his displeasure at the death of his son. That his son was put to death by the lost sheep of Israel that he explicitly sent his son to save. Okay. Verse 46, and about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, whatever, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This is explicitly verse 1 of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" One thing that I want to point out is that while he is saying this phrase, lamenting to God, I want to remind you that if you read all of Psalm 22, it ends in victory. Okay? So, starting in verse 22, I will tell of your name to my brothers in the midst of the congregation. I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you offspring of Jacob, glorify him and stand in awe of him. All you offspring of Israel, for he has not despised or abhorred the affliction of the afflicted. Okay, jumping to verse 27. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before you, for kingship belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the prosperous of the earth eat and worship before him shall bow, all who go down to the dust, even the one who could not keep himself alive. Posterity shall serve him. It shall be told of the Lord to the coming generation. They shall come and proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, that he has done it. Okay? So, just like Psalm 22, it starts with, well, my God, why have you forsaken me? But it ends in victory. Okay? When Jesus dies on the cross, it ends with him being resurrected, victory over death, and giving us eternal life because he took our place that we deserved. So, ka-chow. Let me flip my notes. Okay. Verse 47. And some of the bystanders hearing it said, this man is calling Elijah, because he said Eli, Eli, which is Aramaic. He was speaking in Aramaic rather than Hebrew, which is why they think that when he says my God, you know, if he says Eli, obviously that sounds similar to Elijah. I don't really need to argue that point with you. Verse 48. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. I just want to point out that Jesus, it says he yielded up his spirit, that he had authority over his spirit, which I think is important. Verse 51, and behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. This is so freaking important, okay? Now, you can read, he's talking about a literal physical curtain, like the curtain for your windows, but like a way bigger, way nicer, more elaborate one. This curtain had specific details that needed to be met. You can read about it in Exodus chapter 26, verses 31 to 35. Now, this curtain was in the temple, and it separated the holy place from the most holy place. So there was a separate room in the temple. The most holy place is the only place where a human could go to encounter God during this time. Okay? And the only time it could happen is on the Day of Atonement, which happened once a year. You can read about it in Leviticus chapter 16. What would happen is that the high priest of the time would go through all these rituals to purify himself, make himself right with God, and then he would go into the most holy place and meet with God. Okay, obviously this is a big deal because he is the only human, only once a year, that gets to truly encounter God. It was so important, in fact, that it was only the high priest that would do it, that they would tie a rope around him. So if the high priest was, did something and God delivered judgment to him and killed him while he was in the most holy place, they would use the rope to pull him out because they could not send another person in to get him. So it's a big deal. The curtain is torn. So now the place that God, this room that had been the only place where God resided, the curtain is torn because that's not where he resides anymore. Because of Jesus, now the Holy Spirit can reside in God's people, in us. Freaking absolutely amazing. Okay. Verse 52. The tombs also were open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Okay, I want to clarify something. The word saints, because it's used a lot in religious areas, especially if you have someone that's like Catholic or something. Saint, literally, when you were using the definition that they used in the Bible manuscripts and writing, saint just means a follower of Jesus, like a devout follower. So that's why, like, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was a saint because she devoutly followed her son. Matthew, the apostles, Paul, Timothy, these other people, we can call them saints. We can use it in the same terms today. I'm a devout follower, and so I could say, well, I wouldn't really say, but, I could be called a saint in that term. Now, should you pray to saints, since I'm talking about it? The answer is no, and I'm going to stand by that firmly. I know I have some people in my life that have Catholic backgrounds and whatever, and here's why I don't think you should pray to saints. Because people say they pray to saints so that they intercede on their behalf to God. What the frick was Jesus then? Like, literally, that's entirely what Jesus lived his life to do, to intercede on our behalf for God. He literally died on the cross on our behalf, and it says that he is our advocate, as in a legal advocate, that every day, all the time, he is advocating on our behalf to God. He is interceding for us. So I don't understand why you would need to pray to someone who's imperfect, who's on the same page as you, that they need Jesus to intercede for them. Why you would pray to them to intercede for you. That doesn't make a lick of sense. Especially for people if they're dead, because, well, they're not dead in heaven. But again, like, why would I do this roundabout thing when I have access? I have the Holy Spirit and I have access to Jesus. Like, I don't know why I would pray to anyone else. That, to me, is actually blasphemous, to pray to anything other than the Trinity. I simply would not do. Especially, some people I know will pray to, like, their dead family and whatnot, asking for them to intercede, and I don't understand why, because they're, like, not here. Like, if you're praying to them to pray for you, like, that doesn't make sense to me, I guess, because they're past. They're in heaven or they're in hell, and you don't really know. Versus, I don't know, it makes sense if you can ask, like, other people to pray for you in real life, but if you have to pray to something to pray for you, like, that doesn't make sense to me. Okay? With that, let's move on. Okay, verse 54. Oh, also, sorry, I didn't even talk about, the saints are resurrected and going around the city. Now, I don't know that this is saints that were, like, people that followed Jesus during that time, or saints just in general, like, people that lived generations, hundreds, thousands of years before Jesus, but had faithfully looked forward to the Messiah coming, and so God resurrected them. Like, for example, he could have, we have no clue, but he could have resurrected, like, Moses or Noah, or, like, someone as far back as that. We don't know. I wasn't there. But it clearly says that he resurrected a bunch of people that appeared in the holy city to many of the civilians. Verse 54. When the centurion and those who were with him keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Nothing for me to elaborate thereon. Verse 55, there were also many women there, looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. I love this because in Matthew 27, Jesus had literally told his 12 disciples, the men, that they were all going to flee from him. Peter would deny him, and that he would see them again, but in Galilee. But you know who stayed with him throughout all of it, throughout his crucifixion, throughout his death, the burial, who was at his tomb when he was resurrected? The women. The women were just so faithful. If you don't know, women and men outside of the 12 chosen did follow Jesus around, and we know this for a fact from what's recorded in other Gospels. Obviously, we know from here that Matthew's clearly telling us that the women followed him. It says Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph. I think it's safe to assume that it's the mother of little James, and he must have had a brother named Joseph, and then the mother of the sons of Zebedee, which would be big James and John. And the mother of the sons of Zebedee, her name, which is recorded in Luke, is Salome. So, but as I said, women did follow Jesus around in Luke. Oh my gosh. Okay, Luke chapter 8, verses 2 and 3. And also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Yeah, sorry. Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their means. Okay? And then, like I said, we know that the mother of James and John, that her name is Salome, and you can read that in Mark 15, verse 4. Okay, as I said, the women remained with Jesus, and in Luke 23, verse 49, it says, didn't flip far enough. I never do. It says, and all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things. So they're there as he's on the cross and when he dies. Okay, verse 57. My throat's getting dry. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. Now, in Luke, back in Luke 23, verses 50 to 56, I'm going to read this because I love it, and it gives you more context. Now, there was a man named Joseph from the Jewish town of Arimathea. He was a member of the council, talking about the Sanhedrin, a good and righteous man who had not consented to their decision and action, and he was looking for the kingdom of God. So when the Sanhedrin had made the decision in the middle of the night with their little quorum that they had, obviously they didn't have everyone there, and Joseph was not there to, debate them. But I love that it says he was looking for the kingdom of God. Like, honestly, that's just a beautiful statement to have as your description. Like, that could go on my grave. She was looking for the kingdom of God. I love that. Verse 52. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then he took it down and wrapped it in a linen shroud and laid him in a tomb cut in stone where no one had ever yet been laid. It was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was beginning. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how the body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment. So again, the women were there to help prep Jesus' body for burial. Back to Matthew, verse 58. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there sitting opposite the tomb. When it says the other Mary, it's talking about Mary, the mother of little James and Joseph. In my Bible, or in my study Bible, in my Bible, I needed to clarify, I'm a silly goose. Verse 57, what did I want to read? Let's see. Joseph was a member of the Sanhedrin who did not consent to the actions against Jesus. His high standing with Jewish community gave him access to Pilate. The location of Arimathea is uncertain. Perhaps Ramathaim, in the hill country of Ephraim, 20 miles northwest of Jerusalem. Jewish custom dictated that the crucified bodies should be taken down before evening, especially before the Sabbath, which began at sundown on Friday. Okay, so this is why he asks and is granted to take down the body. Also, it fulfills in Isaiah 53. As you can tell, Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22 are very important prophecies that Jesus, fulfilled. In Isaiah 53, verse 9, it says, "And they made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death, and although he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth." When it says with a rich man in his death, it's because Joseph of Arimathea was a rich man and had this tomb he had bought to be his tomb for when he one day died, but instead he uses it for Jesus, and so it was a rich man's tomb. Okay. Also, I want to know, we know from John chapter 19. Oh my gosh, if I could freaking flip there. Okay, chapter 19, verses 38 to 39. We know that a second council member, actually I don't know if Nicodemus was part of the Sanhedrin or just a Pharisee, but we know that he did help with Jesus' burial. It says, "After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus also, who earlier had come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight." And so they both prepped the body, which I loved that these two priests that, didn't agree with what was going on, plus the women, stayed through the entire process of just literally, imagine, you are that close with Jesus, you were there when everything's happening, and that you believe he's the Messiah, you've been following him for years, you adore him, you're his friend, and then you have to watch him be crucified and die a horrible death. And everyone, not everyone obviously, but the public hates him. And but you love him so much that you don't care, that you take your body, you use the tomb that you got for yourself, and you spend the money to get the aloes, the ointments, the whatever, and you get the linen shroud, and you prepare his body for burial, regardless of what everyone else thinks, because to you, that's the right thing to do for the person that you love. And that reminds me of last year when I had to, unfortunately, go to my brother's funeral, which was almost a year ago. Exactly, we're coming up on it. And I remember the funeral director coming up to me and to the other family members telling us, as they're about to bury Logan in the ground, that it can be really hard, and that, for some people, for a lot of people, they don't want to see that. And so it might be a good time to go. And I was just like, obviously I didn't want to see it, but I was like, no, I'm staying. And they actually ended up letting my brothers and Logan's best friends and my husband shovel in the dirt over his, casket. And I just remember watching it and being like, you know what, Logan, I sat here and I made sure that it was a job well done. I made sure that everything was taken care of to the end and properly done. And so when I think of Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea and the women staying to the end, even though that the Messiah has died, they could not bear to leave him and wanted to give him the proper burial he deserved. That feels so much more real now after having done it with my brother. Of course, we didn't do the same burial tradition as them, but death does feel a lot different now that I've experienced it. Well, somewhat. Okay, verse 62. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember how the impostor said, while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people, He has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, You have a guard of soldiers, go make it as secure as you can. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. So the priests already had some Roman soldiers. Obviously, the Romans were involved in allowing the death penalty be given to Jesus and whatnot. And so when they come to Pilate asking for more soldiers, he's like, you literally have some already. Like, go do it yourself. Like, you did not need me? Just go do it. And yeah, and that's the end of chapter 27, is the dark days before the amazing God-given miracle of the resurrection. So with that, I certainly hope this microphone worked. I hope the audio isn't too terrible. And most of all, I hope I don't have to do this a third time, because my throat is extremely dry and I'm gonna go drink some water or milk. Okay, thanks.